He didn't just notice details, he lived among them. Dominic Ramirez pulled into his driveway late at night, but even before stepping out of his car, he knew something was off. The bedroom light was on when it shouldn't be. The house was too quiet, too perfect, like a staged crime scene waiting for its victim. Coincidence? No. He didn't believe in coincidences. He knew his wife was lying. He had seen the subtle shifts in her habits, felt the tension in her voice. A soldier trained in psychological warfare, he could dismantle a person's mind with precision. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was something far worse. She hadn't just crossed a line. She had walked straight into a trap. And now, as he stood at the door, taking one last breath before stepping inside, one thing was certain. She thought she was playing him. But all along, it was him playing her. And the game was only beginning. Greetings, my dear friend. Please tell me which city and country you are watching this video from, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. The dashboard clock blinked 11:20 p.m. as Dominic Ramirez eased his black Porsche into the driveway of his home in Austin. Something felt off. The master bedroom light was on when it shouldn't be. Melissa was usually in bed by 10, her routine as predictable as the tide. He killed the engine, letting the stillness of the night seep in, his senses sharpening. A week spent in Houston, securing a tech firm against corporate espionage, had kept him fully immersed in his work. But even buried in tasks, he'd sensed something was amiss. The quiet messages she'd quickly brushed aside when he walked into the room. The so-called yoga classes that never seemed to leave a mark on her attire. The subtle distance she kept between them, trying to make it seem like he hadn't noticed. But Dominic saw everything. That's how he survived. He was an army captain specializing in psychological warfare. It was why Aegis Security was the go-to for government agencies and corporations guarding the highest stakes. And now, those same instincts told him tonight was about to change everything. The porch light cast a muted glow over the well-kept lawn, shadows moving between perfectly trimmed hedges. The scene looked staged, a snapshot of suburban tranquility waiting for its players to enter the frame. Dominic reached for his briefcase from the passenger seat, moving with practiced precision. Among the security reports and contracts inside, a USB drive marked with Contingency Protocol 0 lay hidden, something he'd prepped months ago when he first found a burner phone buried in Melissa's gym bag. He slid the key into the lock with barely a sound, grateful for the recent maintenance. The foyer was dimly lit, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, mingling with an electric charge that felt like the calm before a storm. His combat boots, still caked with the mud of Houston's rain, made no noise as they met the hardwood floor. Some habits, like silence and readiness, never left. From upstairs, music drifted down, a jazz melody, but not the light, breezy tunes she usually played. These notes were darker, heavier, filled with something unsettling. Melissa only played jazz when she was up to something. The last time had been just before their anniversary dinner, when she'd conveniently forgotten to mention her ex would be joining them. Dominic placed his briefcase by the stairs and moved through the house with the calculated efficiency of a soldier securing hostile territory. The kitchen? Immaculate, untouched. No dirty dishes. The living room? Perfectly arranged, as if their housekeeper had just stepped out. The kids' rooms? Dark and quiet. They were spending the weekend at his mother's, an arrangement Melissa had been far too eager to suggest. Each step up the stairs was deliberate. His weight shifted carefully to avoid even the faintest creak, though he knew stealth wasn't necessary. She wanted him to find her. This was all part of the show. The master bedroom door stood slightly ajar, spilling warm light into the hallway like a glass of wine tipped too far. Melissa's silhouette shifted behind the gap, a calculated display of grace and allure. Dominic paused, letting his instincts map the room. One exit, the ensuite bathroom. 2 weapons, a gun safe in the closet, and a tactical knife under his side of the bed. Not that he needed either. This wasn't that kind of fight. He pushed the door open to reveal her perfectly orchestrated scene. Melissa stood poised, her body a carefully constructed vision meant to disarm him. The black dress she wore clung to her curves, its fabric chosen for maximum effect. Her auburn hair cascaded in soft waves, the bedside light she'd positioned just right making it shimmer. A glass of rare Italian red wine, the kind she reserved for only the most significant occasions, hung from her manicured fingers, a prop in her calculated act. Every detail was meticulously planned, each element arranged for maximum impact. But there was one thing she'd missed. Dominic had seen ambushes far more intricate than this. "Welcome home, darling," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness, but with an underlying venom. She took a slow sip from the wine glass, watching him over the rim. "How was Houston?" "Productive." Dominic lingered in the doorway, his gaze assessing her every move with the same precision he'd used to break down enemy operatives in the past. The tightness in her shoulders, the way her fingers absent-mindedly grazed her neck, subtle tells, betraying her nerves, the careful angle of her body, her posture, creating just enough space between them. Amateur mistakes. "You're dressed up," he remarked, his tone clinical, distant. "Am I?" She placed the wine glass on the dresser with a deliberate clink, turning to face him fully, ensuring he noticed the effort she'd put into this performance. "I suppose I am. The kids?" "Safe with your mother, just as planned." She smiled, but it was a smile that sent a chill down his spine, a predator's grin. Dominic had seen kinder expressions from vipers. "We need to talk," he said, stepping farther into the room but staying close to the door, near enough to show he wasn't unsettled, far enough to retain control. "About us." She retrieved the wine glass again, holding it between them like a shield. Another tell. Things need to change. What things? Everything. She took another sip, then set the glass down with exaggerated finality. "I'm staying with another man tonight." The words dropped between them, heavy and thick, like smoke in the air. Dominic's face remained impassive, but his mind shifted into full tactical mode, assessing, calculating, recording, just as the cameras he'd installed a month ago captured every moment. "His name is Jericho." She studied his expression, looking for any crack in his steely composure. She wouldn't find one. She had probably rehearsed the speech 100 times while he was away in Houston, perfecting each word, each gesture. "And if you leave me," she had warned him in her mind 1,000 times, "you'll never see your children again." She steeled herself for an outburst, rage, heartbreak, or maybe even violence. Instead, what greeted her was a quiet, knowing smirk. It wasn't angry or desperate. It was unsettling in its calmness, planting a seed of doubt deep within her. Perfect. His voice was almost a whisper, but there was no mistaking the satisfaction lacing his words. Melissa's perfectly arched eyebrows knitted together, the first true flicker of emotion she'd shown all evening. "What did you say?" "You heard me." He slowly loosened his tie, each movement deliberate, as if preparing for something inevitable. "Go to him. Right now. Tonight." Her mind raced, her carefully constructed plan unraveling before her. "You're not angry?" she asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Why would I be?" He removed his tie with practiced precision, folding it neatly, each fold a quiet statement of control. "You've just confirmed what I've known for months." His tone was clinical, detached. He placed the tie on the bed, the dark fabric contrasting sharply against the pristine white sheets. "The cameras saw you sneaking out 3 weeks ago. The burner phone hidden in your gym bag. The lunch meetings that kept running late. No explanation. No remorse." Melissa's face drained of color, her makeup now stark against her pale skin. "You were spying on me?" she whispered, disbelief in her voice. "I run a security firm, Melissa. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" His gaze remained fixed on her, unreadable. "I was just waiting to see how far you'd go. Now I know." This isn't a game, she snapped, her voice sharper now, as anger began to replace the confusion. Good, he replied, his expression unchanging. Anger makes people sloppy. I mean it, Dominic. I'm leaving tonight. If you try to... I won't. He interrupted her smoothly, his tone like ice. Take what you can carry. You have 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Her voice rose in disbelief. 29, he corrected, glancing at his watch with unnerving precision. His gaze never left her, and she flinched at the casualness of it. Better hurry. Melissa stood frozen for a moment, her plans disintegrating in front of her. This wasn't how it was supposed to unfold. She had expected him to break down, beg, throw himself at her feet in a last-ditch effort to keep her. Instead, he was dismissing her as though she were an inconsequential interruption in his day. Fine. With an almost violent motion, she grabbed her overnight bag, already packed, as he had suspected, and stormed past him. But just before she reached the door, she turned to deliver her final threat. Remember what I said about the kids? One wrong move and... Goodbye, Melissa. His indifferent tone hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth, searching for some cutting retort, but the words died before they could escape. He had already turned away, shrugging out of his suit jacket with the ease of a man who had already considered the problem solved. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor as she stormed out, each step a punctuation mark in her departure. The front door slammed behind her, followed by the roar of her car's engine. Within moments, she was gone. Dominic stood still, waiting until the sounds of her exit faded completely. Then, he pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and waited for the line to connect. Larry, it's time. He hung up the phone and walked slowly to the window. He watched as the last of her car's taillights disappeared around the corner. His reflection in the glass was a study in stillness. No sorrow, no regret, just cold, determined eyes that held the promise of what was to come. The game had begun. But it was no longer hers to play. It belonged to him. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, its chimes marking the quiet end of his marriage. Dominic moved down the stairs, his steps measured, purposeful. His briefcase was exactly where he had left it, waiting. He picked it up, walking into his office with a calm determination. The 3 monitors on his desk flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the room. He plugged in the USB drive he had prepared weeks ago. The screen filled with lines of code, silent, precise, and deadly, waiting for a single command. One action could sever every digital connection between him and the life he had shared with Melissa. But first, there was a more personal task to attend to. He stepped out into the backyard, the cool night air swallowing him whole. The fire pit was ready, its gaping maw waiting to consume everything he intended to erase. He stacked the wood with exacting precision, as though preparing for demolition, every piece placed, like a carefully calculated move, in a larger plan. When the flames took hold, they were ravenous, twisting upwards in violent, hungry fingers. He stood there, watching the fire grow, remembering lessons from his past. Fire was a tool. Fire was a weapon. Fire was purification. He returned to the closet. Melissa's side was an altar to indulgence. Designer clothes, high-end labels, outfits more expensive than most people's rent. He began with her prized red dress, the one she had worn to seduce that CEO last year. It fought back as he tore the label from it, but it eventually surrendered with a satisfying rip. One by one, he fed her wardrobe to the flames. Silk blouses from Paris, leather jackets worth more than his first car, and finally, the black cocktail dress she had worn tonight, which dissolved into glowing embers, burning last, as though to erase every last trace of her. His phone buzzed again. Larry. Financial shutdown complete. Joint accounts emptied. Credit cards canceled. She tried using the Amex at a gas station 10 minutes ago. It was declined. Good. Dominic muttered, tossing a handful of delicate, overpriced lingerie into the fire. Security systems are recoded. Biometric access revoked. She's locked out. House, office, cars, everything. Even her email's been frozen. And the surveillance? Live. We've got eyes on everything. Our contact at Widow's Fong confirmed she's with Roe. Dominic nodded and watched the flames lick higher, consuming the last remnants of her. She had started this game, but she had seriously underestimated the player she was up against. Do you want the audio feed? Not yet. Another bundle of clothes? Toss them in the fire. Keep the camera rolling. I want it all. Understood. But Dominic... Larry hesitated. I pulled Roe's full file. This guy isn't just a bar owner. The fights he organizes? Dominic prompted. People don't just get hurt. They die. And it's not random. It happens often. Bodies pile up. Regularly. I know. Dominic stood, watching the smoke curl into the cold night. That's why I sent her to him, he said. Jesus, man. After everything, she made her choice. A designer heel, once elegant, now shriveled and blackened in the flames, its leather twisting in the heat. Now she walks the path she chose. Silence stretched across the line before Larry spoke again, his voice tight. You remember that op in Kandahar? Our target thought he was safe, ran straight into the Taliban's hands, I remember. We could have warned him. We didn't. He made his decision. Dominic's voice was cold, just like she did. The line went dead. The fire reduced the last of Melissa's things to nothing more than charred remains. Phase 1 was complete. Dominic returned to his office, inserted a USB drive, and let the code flow across the screen, severing every connection. Bank accounts, wiped out. Credit cards, canceled. Emails, social media, everything they'd ever shared, gone. Next, he accessed the home security system. The old codes were replaced with new ones. Melissa's fingerprints disappeared from the database. The facial recognition software erased her identity. In a matter of seconds, she was no longer a resident. She was an intruder. Dominic's phone lit up. Melissa's card had been declined again, this time at a hotel. He imagined her expression when the card reader beeped red, the dawning horror as she realized her safety net was gone. Then his personal phone rang. Unknown number. Your wife's crying at a gas station, a rough voice said, tinged with amusement. Dangerous amusement. Jericho Roe, Dominic muttered. Can't pay for her gas. Cold move, brother. Not my problem, Dominic said evenly. She's your issue now. Yeah, about that. Jericho's voice shifted, becoming darker, more predatory. She made promises. Said she could get me access to your clients, your contracts. Now she's saying the codes don't work. Funny how that happens. Here's the deal, brother, Jericho continued. I don't like being played. So maybe we talk, come to some agreement. Dominic's smile was icy, razor sharp. No agreement, she's all yours. Enjoy. He ended the call before Jericho could reply. Dominic's monitors displayed empty streets for now, but soon they'd capture Melissa's return, the moment she would realize how thoroughly her life had fallen apart. Another call from Larry. She just left the gas station. Some guy picked her up. Matches Roe's description. She was crying. Stay on them, Dominic ordered. I need to know where they go. Already on it. You should see what we dug up on the Widow's Hollow. Those basement fights? They're not just boxing matches. No rules, no referees. Just men beating each other to death while rich assholes place bets. Any police interference? Dominic asked. 3 cases in the last year, all mysteriously shut down. Witnesses recanted or disappeared. One detective got reassigned after his daughter's preschool caught fire. Perfect. Dominic's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up footage from the Widow's Hollow. His team had planted cameras weeks ago. Send me everything, especially the deaths. You're really gonna leave her with this psycho? Larry asked. She wanted a thrill. Dominic's reflection stared back from the monitor, calm, unreadable. Now she gets to see real violence. He opened another file: police reports, witness testimonies, autopsy photos. Jericho Rowe wasn't just violent, he was methodical. He broke bones in a deliberate sequence, used fire on those who didn't comply, and collected trophies from fights that had spiraled into chaos. One of the cameras showed Jericho's car pulling into the Widow's Hollow parking lot. Melissa climbed out, still dressed in the outfit that had failed to seduce. Jericho grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the entrance. Even through grainy footage, his grip looked agonizing. She thought she was in control. She thought she had power over men, over Dominic. But instead, she had just walked into a cage, and the predator was already waiting. Dominic poured another drink and leaned back in his chair. The night was still young. Her lesson, however, had only just begun. The Widow's Hollow appeared on Dominic's center monitor, a festering wound in the city's underbelly. His surveillance team had eyes on every angle: the flickering neon sign at the entrance, the alley where unconscious fighters were discarded into vans, the basement where money exchanged hands before blood was spilled. It was 01:23 a.m. when Melissa followed Jericho inside. She still held herself with a false confidence, head high, playing the part of the woman who thought she could bring a powerful man to his knees. She had no idea she was the one who had already fallen. She had no idea that, in Jericho's mind, she was already his property. Dominic flicked through the camera feeds, monitoring their every move as they navigated through the bar. The footage was a stark contrast to what he'd grown used to in Austin's vibrant nightlife scene. No drunken college kids, no wide-eyed tourists roaming around. Instead, the bar was packed with hard-faced men whose eyes were vacant and women who knew the unspoken rule: don't make eye contact. As Jericho strode through the crowd, the regulars recognized him immediately, parting in silent acknowledgement to allow him and Melissa to reach his private booth. "Audio's live," Larry's voice crackled in Dominic's ear. "Should I patch you in? Go ahead." The buzz of static filled Dominic's earpiece, followed by a heavy bass beat that vibrated through the air, designed to mask any sounds below. Then, the murmur of voices from Jericho's booth filtered in. Jericho's low voice resonated, rough and commanding. "Tell me more about your husband's security contracts." Melissa's voice was a touch too bright, as if she was trying to sound at ease. "A little bit of everything. Corporate deals, military contracts, some international projects, mostly government work." "He manages millions in contracts," Jericho observed, his voice a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "And you have access to all of it?" "Of course," Melissa responded quickly, though there was a noticeable hesitation. "I know all his passwords, the protocols. I've handled the business side for years." Dominic's lips twisted into a cold smile. Another lie. She hadn't had that kind of access in over a year, not since Jericho had caught her trying to pilfer client files. "Fascinating," Jericho remarked, his glass chiming softly as he took a deliberate sip. "Very fascinating." Jericho leaned in, pressing further. "And the house? A property like that, it must be under both of your names." Melissa faltered, her voice betraying her discomfort. I'm not sure about the paperwork. Not sure." Jericho's voice sharpened, losing its edge of casual interest. "What about the bank accounts, the business assets?" "I have access to everything. I've got all the cards, all the—" Melissa's words faltered, a flicker of doubt in her voice as she remembered the moment her cards had been declined. "All the what?" Jericho's tone dropped dangerously, softening, but with a chilling undertone. "Well, there might be some temporary issues with the accounts, but I'm sure—" Before she could finish, the sound of glass breaking sharply cut her off. She flinched instinctively. "Temporary issues? Like everything being locked down? Like you having nothing?" Jericho's voice was ice cold. "No, it's not like that. Dominic's just angry. He'll calm down and then—" Melissa froze when Jericho closed the distance between them, the rustle of his clothes filling the air as he leaned in. Then what? His voice dropped to a whisper, now dangerously predatory. You'll bat your eyes and he'll give it all back to you? You honestly think I'm that dumb? No, of course not. Melissa stammered, scrambling for words. You just thought you could play me, Jericho interjected smoothly, finishing her sentence with cold certainty. Promise the impossible. Make a promise you can't keep. Assume I'm just another gullible fool you can toy with. Jericho, please. You're hurting me. Good. His voice deepened, thickening with malice. Lesson 1. No one uses me, not even some bored housewife chasing a thrill. Through the screens, Dominic watched Jericho's fingers curl tightly around Melissa's throat. Not enough to suffocate her, just enough to show her who was in control. For the first time that evening, a genuine look of fear flashed in Melissa's eyes. I don't follow orders well, sweetheart, Jericho sneered, his grin sharp and evident even in the pixelated video feed. And lies? He leaned in closer. I really don't tolerate those. Melissa's laugh was forced, thin and shaky. It's just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to… Shut up. Jericho released his grip, but his hand remained firmly on her throat, lingering like a constant, silent threat. Here's the deal now. You belong to me. Not because I care about gaining your trust. Hell, I've had better. But because you made your choice. You walked into my home, tried to play your little game, and lost. Melissa tried to rise, but Jericho's hand pushed her back down into the chair. Leave? Where do you think you're going? He taunted. Home, she whispered, barely audible. Home? Jericho's voice was mocking. That's cute, but your cards don't work anymore. Your house is locked up. Your husband just watched you try to sell his company's secrets to someone like me. Jericho leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. Face it, sweetheart. You're trapped. Through the screen, Dominic saw Melissa's face transform as the realization finally hit her. Her makeup could no longer hide the terror that bloomed across her expression. She now fully understood the kind of man she had chosen. I have money, she muttered, her voice shaking. Other accounts, savings, things he doesn't know about. Jericho scoffed. No, you don't. My guy already checked. Everything's been frozen. Everything's gone. He leaned in even closer, his finger tracing the edge of her jaw with chilling precision. Face it. You're broke, homeless, alone, except for me. Please, she begged, her voice trembling. I can fix this. I'll talk to Dominic. Make him… A crash of breaking glass interrupted her. Jericho had hurled his whiskey bottle against the wall, sending nearby patrons scrambling in fear. Make him what? Jericho growled, seizing her chin roughly. You still don't get it, do you? He's not some lovesick idiot you can manipulate. He's not even angry with you. He's just done. And you? You're exactly where he wanted you. Melissa's makeup began to streak as tears finally started to fall. What do you mean? She whispered. Think about it, Jericho continued, his tone dripping with cruelty. An army guy, a specialist in psychological warfare who runs a security firm? You really think he didn't know about me? About this place? He chuckled darkly. He didn't just let you go, sweetheart. He pointed you straight at me. Dominic saw the shift in Melissa's face through the screen. The realization hit her like a freight train. Her tears stopped, her face drained of color. No, she whispered in disbelief. He wouldn't… Wouldn't what? Jericho asked, towering over her, his shadow falling across her like a blanket. You really think he'd let you walk into a trap like this? Hand you over to someone like me? Congratulations, sweetheart, Jericho said with bitter satisfaction. You played yourself. Melissa reached for her purse, her hands shaking. I need to… Jericho's hand shot out, gripping her arm with vice-like force, making her gasp in pain. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Now I'm curious. What else don't I know about your husband's business? What other lies have you told? Nothing. I swear, she begged, her voice cracking. We'll see about that, Jericho sneered, pulling her closer. His smile twisted with malice. We've got all night to talk, and I've got some friends downstairs who are very good at asking questions. Dominic saw Melissa's face crumple under the weight of her situation. No escape, no backup, no power. Just Jericho's grip on her arm and the cold realization that she had walked right into a predator's trap. His phone buzzed. Larry again. Jesus, Dominic! Larry's voice crackled through. The basement crew is gearing up. You know what they do to people down there? I know, Dominic replied flatly, his eyes locked on the screen, watching Melissa struggle, her body tense, but her spirit shattered. She had wanted excitement. Now she was about to see real monsters. This is cold, even for you, Larry said, his voice holding a hint of disbelief. No, Dominic replied, his voice icy. Brian will stop him. This isn't cold, it's justice. On the screen, Jericho was dragging Melissa toward the basement stairs. She had stopped crying. She had stopped fighting. She was simply staring ahead, her eyes hollow, the realization settling in. Her game of manipulation had led her straight into the hands of a true predator. Dominic cut the audio, leaving only the grainy video. Let her learn. She had to come to terms with the full gravity of the choice she'd made, how much she was willing to sacrifice for the man she had chosen over the family that had always been hers. Some lessons, unfortunately, could only be learned through hard experience. At 3:47 a.m., the surveillance cameras caught the first signs of life at the far edge of their range. Melissa's car appeared, swerving slightly as she parked. Her attempt was sloppy, the tires grazing the neatly manicured lawn she had once insisted on maintaining. Her perfect hairstyle was now a tangled mess, mascara streaking down her cheeks like the remnants of a brutal battle. Dominic watched her through his security network, his gaze cold and unfeeling. She stumbled out of the car, her black dress creased and a red bruise darkening the skin on her throat where Jericho had gripped her. Tonight, she had learned the true difference between flirting with danger and being consumed by it. The sharp rhythm of her heels against the concrete was the only sound as she approached the front door, her steps unsteady. With each movement, she seemed to lose more of the confidence she'd had earlier in the evening. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her key ring, struggling to find the right key. When it finally slid into the lock, it stuck, her frustration mounting with every failed attempt. She twisted it over and over, but the lock refused to cooperate, leaving the door an insurmountable barrier where once it had been an entryway. The doorbell rang, a single trembling chime, followed by a second, and then a frantic series of rings. Panic crept into her voice as it crackled over the security system. Open the door. Now. Dominic sipped his whiskey slowly, his eyes glued to the monitors, watching her unravel with cruel precision. I mean it, Dominic. You can't do this. She pounded on the door, the sound of her designer rings clinking against the wood echoing in the silent night. This was still my house, he thought coldly, recalling a time when she might have shared that belief. Desperate, she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to open the security app, but it wouldn't launch. Her access had been revoked hours ago. Frantic, she dialed his number, only to be met by the automated message. This number has been disconnected. You bastard. Her scream tore through the night, her mascara running like ink, staining her face with the mark of defeat. You can't just lock me out. Her voice was raw with a mix of fury and desperation. I'll call the police, she threatened, but Dominic simply smirked. Let her. The house was legally his now, something she'd never bothered to confirm when she signed the papers. To her, it was still hers, but legally, she was just a trespasser. The cameras tracked her movements as she circled the house, testing every window, every door. Even a small bathroom window she had once joked was too tiny for even a burglar to fit through. Every exit was locked, every path shut off. When she returned to the front porch, Her composure was completely shattered. The woman who had so confidently tried to control him hours ago was gone. The seductress who thought she could win him over was nowhere to be seen. Now, standing before the door, she finally understood the true weight of her decision. "Please," she whispered, pressing her forehead to the wood, her voice breaking. "Please, Dominic, let me in. We can talk about this." Dominic finished his drink, his eyes never leaving the screen. He watched as she collapsed onto the porch steps, her sobs now genuine, no longer the staged theatrics of earlier. His phone buzzed with a message from Jericho's number. "Your wife's crying on your porch. Real cold, brother. Hope you know what kind of enemy you've made." Dominic deleted the message without responding, letting Jericho believe he held the upper hand. Sooner or later, Jericho would see the cost of taking what didn't belong to him. On the security feed, Melissa stood up. Her face was a streaked mess of makeup and tears, her expression twisted with a mixture of rage and desperation. Her eyes locked onto one of the cameras, and her voice, though dripping with venom, betrayed the fear beneath. "You'll regret this," she spat, the words coming out like a curse. "I'll take everything, the kids, the money, your reputation, everything." Dominic leaned forward, smirking as she glared at him through the lens, unaware of his silent response. His voice was low and confident, filled with a calm menace. "You can try." She stumbled back to her car, revving the engine before peeling out of the driveway, the tires screaming against the asphalt. But no one knew that she wasn't really leaving. She was retreating, regrouping. She was heading straight back to Jericho, not realizing that every step toward him was tightening the noose around her neck. Dominic's phone rang again. "Larry, she's heading back to the Widow's Hollow," his friend reported, his voice tense. "But Dominic, Jericho's setting something up. His crew's in the basement again. They're setting it up like they do when they want someone to disappear." "Good," Dominic replied, rising from his chair and stretching out the stiffness in his muscles. Let her see exactly who she chose. Larry hesitated. "You really won't let this play out? Once she's in that basement, she won't die." Dominic's voice was icy and unwavering. "Jericho will break her. He'll hurt her pride. Show her what real power looks like, but he won't kill her." "How can you be so sure?" Larry asked. "Because he's predictable," Dominic answered, his tone colder than before. "He doesn't want her gone. He'll use her to get leverage, force information out of her. Our clients, our contracts." A dark smile tugged at Dominic's lips. "Let him try. Every move he makes just digs his grave deeper." A long silence followed before Larry spoke again. "I've known you a long time, brother. You've seen me orchestrate calculated, precise operations before. But this is something else entirely. She's using her own decisions to bring about her downfall. She chose this path." Dominic turned his gaze to the window, staring out into the deepening darkness of the early morning sky. "All I did was ensure it would lead exactly where it was meant to." After ending the call, he stood motionless, watching the first sliver of dawn inch its way across the horizon. In just a few hours, he'd have to call his mother, check in on the kids, and begin the painful process of explaining why their mother wouldn't be coming back. But for now, he stood in quiet contemplation, fully aware that across the city, Melissa was about to face the hardest truth anyone could learn. Some games have no winners. Some decisions are irreversible, and some men don't play by the rules she thought she could break. She thought she could break him. Instead, she had shattered herself. As for Dominic, he would witness it unfold in slow motion, piece by piece, until nothing remained of the woman who believed she could betray him and walk away unscathed. As the sun crept higher, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the first act of his revenge was complete. The rest would follow in its own time. Each step, each consequence, carefully planned, until justice wore his face and vengeance spoke through his name. Melissa may have started the game, but Dominic would end it, and he never lost. The light of dawn filtered through the bulletproof windows of Aegis Security's downtown office as Dominic reviewed the reports from the night. Melissa had tried to breach their accounts 17 times since first light. Each attempt recorded. Every failure logged. Larry entered without a knock, a tablet in hand. "She's getting desperate," she remarked. "Just tried to pawn her wedding ring at Max's jewelry store. Max called me, just like you asked." Larry sat down across from him. She was practically begging. Started at $10, dropped to 5, then 2. What else? "She's been calling everyone. Friends, family, business contacts. No one's answering. It's incredible how quickly people disappear when the money dries up," Dominic muttered, pulling up a live feed on his screen. "Where is she now?" "Still sitting outside the Widow's Hollow. Been there about 20 minutes. Probably steeling herself to face Jericho after last night," Dominic said quietly. "Yeah, and he's inside, fuming. Just got off the phone with his bookie. Apparently he promised money he doesn't have, thinking Melissa would give him access to your accounts," Larry added, shaking her head. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marshall, the head of digital security, entered, holding a printout. "Boss, you need to see this. She's trying to hack into the company's servers." Dominic grabbed the paper, scanning the list of failed login attempts. "She used her old password and your mother's maiden name," Marshall reported. "Alert our clients," Dominic commanded. "Anyone she tries to contact might be a potential security threat." "Already done," Marshall replied, passing over another sheet. "But it doesn't end there. She sent emails to 3 of our government contracts claiming she has proof of fraud. They forwarded everything to us, as per protocol. But she's getting creative." Dominic's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number flashing on the screen. "Your wife's running out of options. Time to talk business. Jericho's making his move." He showed the message to Larry. "Right on schedule," Dominic observed. "She's trying to send him a signal." "No need," he said, his tone detached. "He'll escalate things himself." Dominic rose from his seat, walking toward the window. "How many men does he have at his disposal?" "Maybe 6 regulars. A few more he can call in," Larry answered. "Why?" "Because soon, he'll need to prove something. Show everyone that he can't be played." Dominic turned back to his team. "I want eyes on every entrance to this building. The second his people show up, I want to know." "You think he'll come here?" Marshall asked. "Not him," Dominic replied. "He'll send someone else first. Test our defenses." Larry's expression darkened. "The bone breakers?" "Exactly." Dominic returned to his desk. "Marshall, initiate protocol red. Full surveillance, all channels. Larry, prepare the response team." "You're planning to fight back?" Marshall asked, surprised. "No," Dominic said, a cold smile tugging at his lips. "I'm going to let them walk right into another trap." The office buzzed with activity as his orders were put into motion. On the security monitors, Dominic saw Melissa finally leave her car and head toward the Widow's Hollow. Her steps were unsteady, every movement oozing with fear. "Should we warn her?" Marshall asked quietly, his voice tinged with concern. "About what Jericho does to women who cross him?" "She made her choice," Dominic said, his voice hard. "Now she has to face the consequences." The cameras inside the Widow's Hollow showed Melissa entering Jericho's office. Her designer clothes from yesterday were now disheveled, stained. Jericho sat behind his desk, his muscular frame taut with barely controlled rage. "Please," Melissa's voice crackled through the surveillance feed. "I just need a little cash. Enough for a hotel room." Dominic's lips twisted into a grim smile. Funny thing about cash. Jericho stood up from his chair, the movement slow and deliberate. "You promised me millions, deals, government contracts, and now here you are, begging for hotel money?" Melissa's voice trembled, but she tried to hold her ground. "I can still deliver on those promises. Just give me more time." He slammed his hands down on the desk with a violent force, his voice booming in response. Time? Do you really think time will fix this? I vouched for you, Melissa. I put my reputation on the line with people who don't tolerate failure. You promised them payoffs that were based on nothing but lies. They weren't lies. Melissa's voice cracked with desperation. I can get the money. I just need… Jericho cut her off, his anger a chilling undercurrent. He moved around the desk, closing in on her with an oppressive presence. Need what? More time? More lies? You're out of options, Melissa. You've run out of luck. His gaze was merciless as he loomed over her. Your accounts are wiped clean. You tried to sell a fake Rolex at my contacts shop. It's over. Melissa, that watch wasn't real, and nobody bought it. Melissa recoiled, her eyes wide with disbelief. Fake? No, that watch was real. Jericho grabbed her by the arm with unrelenting force. No, Melissa, everything you've ever owned is a lie. The Rolex, your rings, even your wedding band? It's cubic zirconia. That's not true, she stammered, her voice shaky. He wouldn't… Wouldn't what? Prepare? Jericho's laugh was bitter. He runs a security company, Melissa. You honestly think he wouldn't have expected this moment? Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes, but she stubbornly clung to hope. I can fix this. Just give me a chance. The sharp sound of a slap echoed through the room, and Melissa stumbled backward, clutching her cheek. Chances are over, Jericho said coldly, his voice final. You'll call your husband, have him wire $5 million to my account, or I'll make sure this goes very badly for you. He won't, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He won't pay for me. Jericho's expression darkened with a dangerous edge. Then you'd better figure out how to settle your debt. In his office, Dominic watched the entire confrontation unfold on the security monitors. Jericho's charming facade had crumbled, revealing the predator lurking beneath. As Jericho pushed forward with his threats, Dominic's phone rang. Larry, the SUVs just left the Widow's Hollow. They're heading this way. How many? 4 per vehicle, all armed, came the response. Good, Dominic replied, pressing a button on his desk. Activate Protocol Red. Let them pass the first checkpoint. You sure about this? Larry asked. Trust me, Dominic said, glancing at his watch. It was nearly time. He leaned back, a quiet satisfaction settling in as the plan began to unfold. He wasn't simply facing Jericho anymore. This was about to turn into a battle of wits. The hunt is on, Dominic murmured under his breath. The security monitors tracked the black SUVs as they approached Aegis Security's building. 8 heavily armed men, eager for a confrontation. Dominic's team was already in place, waiting. Larry's voice crackled over the comms. We're letting them through the first checkpoint just as you instructed. Response teams are standing by. You sure about letting them get this close? Larry asked again. Sometimes you have to let the enemy think they're winning, Dominic said with a cold grin. The SUVs pulled into the underground garage. On the monitors, Dominic saw Jericho's men step out. Tough, battle-worn men with the kind of look in their eyes that said they'd survived hell. Prison fighters, their muscles hard and their faces etched with scars. Boss, Marshall's voice came over the comm. They're heading for the service elevator, armed with bats and brass knuckles. Let them come, Dominic said, his tone calm, even detached. He activated the building-wide comm system. All teams, hold positions. No engagement until I give the signal. The elevator camera flickered on. The men were inside, tension thick in the air. The leader, a hulking figure with a tattooed head, checked his phone. His gravelly voice came through the speakers. Rowe wants him scared, not dead. Break some bones, trash the office. Make a statement. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor. The men stepped out, weapons raised, ready to wreak havoc. Search every room, the leader ordered, his voice low and authoritative. Find Ramirez. The men fanned out, their boots echoing on the polished floors as they moved with military precision. Dominic tracked their every step, his eyes narrowed, a plan forming. They were walking straight into a trap. Larry's voice came through the earpiece again. "Not yet. Let them settle in." The men reached Dominic's office door. The leader tried the handle. "It's unlocked," he said, smirking, thinking they had the upper hand. The door swung open, and they found Dominic sitting at his desk, calm and composed, his hands neatly folded in front of him. "Gentlemen," Dominic said, his voice devoid of fear, "I assume you're here to deliver a message?" The leader stepped forward, raising his bat, letting it thud against his palm with a menacing sound. A true trickster. A real comedian, this guy. Rowe waves hello. Does he? Dominic didn't budge, staying perfectly still. "And what else has Jericho got to say? He says you need a lesson in respect. He also says you owe him $5 million by midnight or things are about to get ugly." Quite the proposition. Dominic pressed a button on his desk. In an instant, steel shutters crashed down, locking the windows and doors, plunging the room into absolute darkness. "Let me offer an alternative." In the blink of an eye, red laser dots appeared on the chests of every intruder. Hidden panels in the walls slid open, revealing Dominic's security detail, all geared up in full tactical armor. The man called Taos whipped around, realizing he was trapped. "Drop your weapons," Dominic said evenly, "or we'll show you why ex-street fighters shouldn't challenge military professionals." "You're bluffing," one of the men snarled. "You can't pull this off." The sharp crack of a rifle echoed in the room. A bullet hole appeared in the floor just inches from his feet. "That was your warning," Dominic said, rising from his chair. "Next time, it'll be your kneecap. Your move." The sound of weapons clattering to the floor filled the room. The bravado drained from Jericho's men, replaced by fear. "Smart choice," Dominic remarked, stepping away from his desk. "Now, let's discuss the message you're going to take back to Jericho." "We don't deliver messages," Taos spat. "We deliver pain. Pain." Dominic chuckled darkly. "You don't even understand the true meaning of that word." "Larry." "Yes, boss." Larry was already in motion. Before Taos could even blink, Larry's fist collided with his jaw, sending the massive man crashing to the ground in a heap, blood spilling from his mouth. "Anyone else care to talk about pain?" Dominic asked, looking at the remaining men. The room fell silent. Good, because real pain isn't just about broken bones or a few punches. Dominic crouched beside Taos, who groaned on the floor. Pain is watching everything you hold dear slip away. Pain is realizing you're no longer the predator, you're the prey. "Now what do you want?" One of the men stuttered, his voice quaking. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to deliver a message." Dominic stood tall again. "Tell Jericho this isn't some game he can win. Every move he makes just tightens the noose around his neck. And if we don't?" The man's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Then my team will show you what they learned in places where rules don't exist." Dominic gave a nod to Larry. "Show them what a shattered femur feels like." "Wait!" The men began to back away. "We'll tell him, whatever you want." Dominic gave a small, approving nod. Smart choice. He returned to his desk, then hesitated. "One more thing. The woman he's holding? She's not his leverage for getting to my money. She's his ticket to an early grave." "Boss?" Marshall's voice crackled through the comm. "The package is ready. Perfect timing." Dominic pressed another button. More panels slid open, revealing a bank of monitors displaying footage from Jericho's operations, death matches, executions, and bodies being disposed of. "See this?" Dominic gestured toward the screens. "Every illegal fight, every murder, every body tossed into the river. It's all documented, all ready to be sent to every law enforcement agency in Texas." One of the men muttered under his breath, "Jericho will kill us if we tell him this. Jericho can't kill anyone if he's locked up in maximum security." Dominic's grin was as cold as steel. "Think about that while you're delivering my message. He signaled his security team, and one by one, they zip-tied the intruder's hands. "Take them to the garage," Dominic ordered. "Let them keep one of their vehicles. The other?" He paused, a cold smile creeping across his face. "Send it back in pieces." As the team escorted the men out, Larry approached Dominic's desk. That went smoothly. "Phase 1 did," Dominic replied, pulling up more surveillance footage. "Now, we wait for Jericho's next move." "You think he'll hurt her?" Larry asked. "We'll find out if she's still useful to him. I'm betting he will." Dominic's gaze remained fixed on the cameras showing Melissa still trapped in Jericho's office. The more pressure Jericho feels, the deeper his grave gets. "Cold, man, cold," Larry muttered, shaking his head. Dominic didn't take his eyes off the screen. "This isn't cold. This is war. And in war, you don't just defeat your enemy, you annihilate them." "Exactly," Larry said, finishing the thought. Dominic stood, watching his security team load Jericho's men into the last SUV. Now comes the interesting part. "What's that?" Watching a monster realize he's no longer the apex predator. The SUV roared out of the garage, carrying Jericho's battered crew, the crushing weight of their failure hanging over them. In no time, they'd arrive at the widow's place. Soon, Jericho would realize that what he had hoped would be a display of power had instead made him appear weak. In Melissa, the widow, he would discover that seeking shelter with a monster only works if that monster controls the game. But Dominic had crossed that line. This wasn't a game anymore. Dominic wasn't playing, he was at war. And in war, there's no second chance. The widow's security cameras recorded Jericho's men returning, a single SUV replacing the expected pair. The men stumbled out, bruised and humiliated. Dominic watched the whole scene unfold on his surveillance feed as Towes limped into Jericho's office, blood dripping from his chin. Melissa sat quietly against the wall, trying to remain unseen, as Jericho rose from his desk. "Where's the other truck?" His voice crackled through the hidden mics. "Where are the rest of my men?" It was a trap. Towes wiped blood from his lip. "Ramirez, he was waiting for us. Waiting." Jericho grabbed him by the collar, furious. "What do you mean, waiting?" "The whole place was rigged," Towes gasped, struggling to speak. "His team, they're not just security, they're military-grade killers. You had 8 men, Jericho." Jericho slammed Towes into the wall. 8 trained fighters, and you let them take you down like that?" Towes' voice cracked with frustration. "They had snipers, hidden panels in the walls. We were surrounded before we knew what hit us." Jericho's anger flared as he turned away, pacing the room. "Did you at least get to Ramirez?" Towes hesitated, struggling for breath. "He sent a message." "What message?" "He said this isn't a game he can afford to lose." Towes choked out. "He's got footage. Every fight, every cleanup, everything. He said if we don't back off, he'll send it all out." The sound of a whiskey bottle shattering against the wall, just inches from Towes' head, made everyone freeze. Jericho's face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. "He's bluffing," Jericho snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "No one has footage. No one has proof." "We saw it," one of the fighters muttered, speaking up in a tone that felt heavy with truth. "The monitors, they're full. Every fight, every operation, every move we've ever made." A tense silence filled the room, suffocating and thick with dread. Melissa shrank into her corner as Jericho's fury grew into something far darker, filling the space like an approaching storm. "Get out," he growled, his voice chillingly calm. "All of you, out." The men scrambled to leave, and in the blink of an eye, Melissa was left alone with Jericho, whose world was crumbling around him. "You," Jericho growled, turning to her with a look that could kill. "This is your fault." "I didn't know," Melissa's voice trembled. "I swear, I didn't know he—" "Didn't know what?" Jericho snapped, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her to her feet. Didn't know your husband runs the most advanced security firm in Texas? Didn't know he specializes in taking down people like me? Please, Melissa begged, pain shooting through her arm as she winced. You're hurting me. Hurting you? Jericho's laugh was cold, jagged like glass breaking. Baby, you don't know what hurt is. Not yet. The door swung open. One of Jericho's regular fighters entered, grim-faced. Boss, there's another problem. What now? The second SUV, it just showed up, in pieces, delivered to the front door, and there's a note. What note? The fighter handed over a crumpled piece of paper. Jericho snatched it from him, reading it, his grip on Melissa's arm tightening until she winced. The note simply read, "Try again. See what happens." Jericho crumpled the paper in his fist, fury radiating off him. Your husband thinks he's clever, thinks he can threaten me in my own territory. Please let me go, Melissa pleaded, desperation in her voice. I'm of no use to you. Jericho's smile was twisted, full of malice. This isn't about money anymore, sweetheart. This is about respect, about power, about making sure everyone knows what happens when they cross me. His phone rang, and without a word, he answered it on speaker, allowing Melissa to hear. Jericho Rowe, Dominic's voice came through, smooth and measured. I trust you received my message. You smug bastard, Jericho growled, his grip tightening around the phone. You think a few cameras are going to scare me? Nah, not cameras, Dominic replied, his voice calm but laced with something icy. But the 3 federal agencies I've just sent preliminary evidence to, that might be a problem. You're bluffing. Check your email, Dominic's voice came again, almost mocking. Time-stamped confirmation receipts, along with a copy of every piece of footage I've gathered. Insurance, Dominic added, the smile in his tone clear even over the phone. Jericho's face drained of color as he released Melissa's arm and rushed to his computer. His fingers trembled as he opened his inbox. The weight of it hit him, his face going pale as he absorbed the full scope of Dominic's message. You sound worried. Dominic's voice came again, tinged with amusement. Better check that email, Jericho. Begin to grasp the real nature of the game you're entangled in. Game. Jericho slammed his fist down on the desk with such force it rattled everything. So you want to play? Let's see how much you enjoy it when your wife's screams fill the air. Go ahead. Dominic's voice was steady, unwavering. Every mark you make is another year added to your sentence. Every threat you make gives the prosecutors more ammunition. But you won't hurt her. Do you think you really know me? I know you all too well, Dominic responded, a hint of disdain creeping into his tone. You're nothing but a schoolyard bully who never learned that there are far worse predators out there. You're going to let her go. No, I won't. Yes, you will. Because in 10 minutes, every news outlet in Texas will be broadcasting footage of your latest incident. The one where you burned that businessman alive for failing to pay up. Imagine the manhunt that will follow. Picture how many of your so-called allies will abandon you once the authorities close in. Jericho's face lost its color, turning from pale to ghostly. That fight had been private, deep in the building's basement, no cameras allowed. How do you know? I have eyes everywhere, Jericho. I've been watching you for months. Every secret, every crime, every body, everything is documented. Everything is ready to bring you down. What do you want from me? Dominic's voice was sharp, final. I already have what I need. You're about to lose everything. Your club, your fighters, your reputation. All of it, because you thought you could take something that wasn't yours. She came to me, Jericho spat. Your wife wanted this. Now she's your problem. Keep her, hurt her, kill her, I don't care. But remember, every bruise, every threat, it all adds up. More evidence, another nail in your coffin. The call ended abruptly. Jericho stood motionless, staring at the phone in his hand, his eyes darting to Melissa, his face twisted with a sickening blend of rage and fear. He's lying, Melissa whispered, her voice quivering. "He has to be. No one could have this much on you." Jericho's computer pinged with a new message, another email. He opened it, his eyes widening as he saw the photos, pictures of him disposing of bodies, torturing debtors, running illegal fights. Each image had a timestamp. Each one was undeniable. "Your husband," Dominic's words echoed in his mind, "just signed your death warrant." "No." Melissa stumbled backward, her voice barely a whisper. "He's bluffing. He wouldn't let you die." "Let me?" Jericho stormed toward her, his rage boiling over. "Sweetheart, Dominic's counting on it. Every move I make to hurt you only digs my grave deeper. And if I go down, you're coming with me." Through the cameras, Dominic watched everything unfold just as he had orchestrated. Jericho's fury was clouding his judgment. His violent impulses would be his undoing. As for Melissa, she was about to learn that some decisions can never be reversed. Some games can't be won. Some monsters are less terrifying than the men who hunt them. The real hunt had just begun. Dominic leaned back in his chair, surveying the live feed from Aegis Security's surveillance network. The monitors flickered, showing various angles of Jericho's hideout. Melissa had been moved to the basement, away from the windows, with no visible escape route. Smart, but predictable. "He's gathering his forces," Larry reported, her voice coming through Dominic's earpiece. "Every fighter, every enforcer, building a small army." "How many?" Dominic asked. 20 so far," Larry replied. "More are on the way. These aren't just street punks, Dominic. Some of them have military training. Dishonorable discharges, but they're still trained." "Perfect." Dominic accessed personnel files on his tablet. They'll know exactly what's coming for them. The basement cameras showed Jericho pacing nervously, phone pressed tight to his ear. "I don't care what it costs. Give me everything on Ramirez. Family, friends, weaknesses. There has to be something we can exploit." Melissa sat handcuffed to a steel chair, her eyes locked on Jericho as he unraveled before her. Her makeup had long since washed away, replaced by tear-streaked cheeks and an unmistakable sense of dread. She flinched every time he came too close. "You're wasting your time," she murmured. "Dominic doesn't have weaknesses." Jericho spun around, his eyes wild. "Everyone has weaknesses," he hissed. "Kids, family, friends, something they care about. His kids are gone. You'll never find them. His family's under heavy guard. His company's a fortress." She laughed bitterly. "I was supposed to be his weak point. How well do you think that worked out for you?" "Shut up." Jericho grabbed the back of her chair, jerking it forward as he leaned in with a twisted sneer. "You think this is funny? You think this is just a game?" "No," Melissa replied, her tone ice cold. "I think this is exactly what he wanted. You find yourself trapped, sinking deeper into desperation with every passing second. As for me, I'm finally seeing the true face of the monster I've decided to follow." The loud crack of a slap echoed through the speakers. Melissa's head whipped to the side, blood trickling from her busted lip. "I'm the monster here." Jericho's hand shot out and gripped her face tightly. "Your husband just tossed you to the wolves," he snarled. "Left you here to rot. What does that make him?" "Smart," Melissa muttered, her words dripping with defiance. She spat blood at him. "He knew exactly how you'd react. Every move, every step. He played both of us." Jericho's hand rose again, ready to strike, but his phone rang before he could land the blow. "What?" he barked, voice clipped. A panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "Boss, we've got a major problem. A big problem." "What kind of problem?" Jericho demanded, tension coiling in his voice. "Police just raided 3 of our warehouses. The DEA hit 2 others. They knew exactly where to look, knew exactly what to find." "Impossible," Jericho muttered, his face turning ashen. "Those locations were clean." "They're not anymore. Someone planted evidence, drugs, weapons, paperwork. Everything's tied back to you. They're calling it a major organized crime bust. Jericho's color drained. He turned toward his computer, frantically refreshing news sites. Every local news channel was running the story. His empire was collapsing in real time. Sir, Marshall is in Dominic's surveillance room. Phase 3 is complete. The DEA found everything exactly where we planted it? Yep. Good job. Dominic checked his watch, unfazed. Send the next push. Tip them off about the basement fights. Include the location of our friend in the concrete. The businessman Jericho killed last month? The very same. Make sure they bring ground-penetrating radar. Marshall nodded and left the room. Meanwhile, Jericho was becoming frantic, shoving papers into a shredder as he barked orders into the phone. Burn everything. Destroy the books. Wipe the computers. Find me a way out of this. Melissa's voice cut through the chaos, soft, but thick with irony. Running, huh? What happened to being the big shot? The one everyone fears? Shut up! Jericho snapped, grabbing a bottle and throwing it at the wall next to her. The glass exploded, and Melissa screamed in response. One of his fighters appeared at the basement door. Boss, cops are setting up outside. A lot of them. The back entrance is still clear, but they're talking about bringing in tactical teams. Something about bodies in the foundation. Jericho yanked at his hair, frustration bubbling over. This is impossible. Nobody knew about that. Nobody. Melissa's laugh was humorless. Dominic knew. Dominic knows everything. You think you're the smartest guy in the room, but you're just his puppet. Jericho stalked toward her, barely containing his rage. You think this is funny? Let's see how much you laugh when the lights go out. Just then, the emergency generators kicked in, bathing the basement in an eerie red glow. What's happening? Jericho demanded. The power's out, one of his men replied. That's not possible. We have backups. The backups are compromised, Melissa said, her voice unnervingly calm. Everything's compromised. Dominic's taking you apart piece by piece. Jericho's control shattered. He lunged at Melissa, seizing her throat with a brutal grip. You think you know what's going on? You think you understand what he's doing better than I do? She gasped, her voice barely audible. This isn't about me. It's not about you either. It's about sending a message, a warning, to show everyone what happens when they cross him. Cross him? Jericho's bitter laugh echoed through the room. Baby, when I'm done with you, there won't be enough left of you to... His phone rang again, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. What? He snapped. Having a rough day? Dominic's voice came through, smooth and indifferent. It's about to get worse. You think you've won? You think this is the end? Jericho turned back to his computer. His screen flooded with emails, photos, videos, documents, everything he thought was buried. Every crime, every secret he believed was hidden, was now exposed. Impossible, he whispered, his eyes wide in disbelief. Those files were encrypted. Nothing's impossible with the right resources. Dominic's voice was cold. Check your bank accounts. Jericho's hand trembled as he opened his banking app. His heart skipped a beat as he saw it. His accounts were drained. Millions gone. Where's my money? He rasped, voice barely above a whisper. It's being transferred to various law enforcement agencies as we speak. Anonymous tips had been flooding in about Jericho Rowe's criminal activities, and the authorities were grateful for the information. However, gratitude was the last thing on Jericho's mind in that moment. His eyes were aflame with fury, his mind a storm of rage. I'll kill her, he growled, tightening his grip on Melissa's hair and yanking her head back to expose her throat. I swear, I'll do it. Melissa remained unshaken. His voice dropped to a cold, menacing whisper. I'll make it slow. No, came a voice, cutting through the tension like a blade. It was Dominic, his tone unwavering and lethal. Let her go. Jericho's nostrils flared as he processed Dominic's words. Walk away, Dominic continued, his voice calm but firm. Disappear, because in 5 minutes, SWAT will have every exit sealed except the back door. After that, It'll only be a matter of time before they breach. You really want to die in this basement? Jericho snarled in disbelief. You're bluffing. Dominic didn't flinch. Check your security cameras. Count your tactical units. Ask yourself, Jericho, do you really want to end it here? Outside, the sound of sirens wailed, a storm of urgency, accompanied by the buzz of radio chatter indicating the police were already in position. Jericho didn't release his grip on Melissa, but his eyes darted to the monitors, quickly scanning the situation and confirming Dominic's words. This isn't over, Jericho spat, his voice dripping with venom. It's over the moment you took what was mine, Dominic shot back coolly. Now get out while you still can. The line went silent. Jericho stood still, his mind racing as the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. His thoughts were a blur. We need to move, boss, one of his men called from the door, pulling him out of his stupor. Now. Jericho's eyes flickered toward Melissa, torn between violence and the instinct for survival that screamed louder. In the end, survival won. He reached into his pocket, retrieved a key, and with a sharp click, released Melissa from the handcuffs. Tell your husband something for me, he hissed, his voice seething with malice. Next time, I won't be so merciful. There won't be a next time, Melissa retorted quietly, rubbing her raw wrists, her voice full of quiet defiance. Jericho shot her one last look, grabbed his go bag, and bolted for the back exit, his men in tow. Moments later, the police stormed through the front, finding Melissa alone in the basement, still reeling from the ordeal. Dominic, watching it all unfold through his surveillance system, felt satisfaction bloom in his chest as each piece fell into place like a well-executed chess move. Is that it? Larry's voice came, laced with skepticism. We're just letting him slip away? For now, Dominic answered smoothly, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. He'll head for his backup location, the one he thinks is hidden. That's where we'll set the real trap. A cold smile tugged at Dominic's lips. The game isn't over yet. Outside, the police lights bathed the widow's home in flashing reds and blues as tactical teams swarmed the building. Meanwhile, Melissa, wrapped in a blanket, sat in the back of an ambulance, giving her statement to detectives. Through his surveillance feed, Dominic watched as she tried to downplay Jericho's abuse, still holding on to the hope that she could salvage something from the wreckage of her life. Targets moving south on Highway 71, Larry reported, his voice steady. 3 vehicles, alternating routes at each exit. He's trying to throw us off. And his destination? Dominic asked, already knowing the answer. Just like you predicted, Larry said, his voice tinged with admiration. The ranch house in Bastrop, his secret hideout. Dominic smiled, remembering the months of meticulous planning that had gone into this. The shell companies, the fake identities, the misdirection. It had all been nothing but a diversion for someone who knew exactly where to look. Status on the welcoming party? Dominic asked. ATF, FBI, and the Texas Rangers are in place. They're just waiting for him, Larry confirmed. Good, Dominic said, his voice flat and focused. He turned to Marshall. Time for the final push. Send the evidence. Marshall nodded and began typing quickly at his terminal. Uploading now. Bank records, offshore accounts, connections to human trafficking rings, everything we've been holding back. At that moment, a junior analyst appeared at the door. Detective Sanchez wants to speak to you about Mrs. Ramirez's statement. Put him through, Dominic instructed, signaling for the analyst to connect the call. The detective's voice came through, calm but with an underlying concern. Mr. Ramirez, your wife is requesting protective custody. She's afraid Roe will retaliate. Afraid of the wrong person, Dominic muttered under his breath, then more clearly, grant her request. Get her transferred to the safe house on Riverside, the one under surveillance. Larry raised an eyebrow once the call ended. You don't think she'll try to run once she feels safe? Better we control where she goes, Dominic replied coolly, his attention already returning to the monitors. Jericho's convoy was nearing Bastrop, splitting up to take separate routes toward the ranch. It was an amateur move, a clear sign of his desperation. "Boss," one of his men radioed in, panic creeping into his voice. "Something's wrong. Too much activity around the property." "What kind of activity?" Jericho demanded. "Vehicles parked in the woods, movement in the trees. Looks military." "Impossible," Jericho snarled. "No one knows about this place. No one." A new voice came over the comms. "Jericho Row, this is the FBI. The property is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." A long silence followed before Jericho's bitter laugh filled the comms. Ramirez. Had to be Ramirez. He knew about this place all along. "Boss, what now?" one of his men asked, fear creeping into his voice. Jericho's face twisted in fury as the trap snapped shut around him. They were trapped. This was the inevitable outcome of forcing someone into a corner. The man's voice quivered with fear. "They've got gunships in the air and I'm seeing at least 50 agents on the ground," he said, panic rising. Dominic remained composed in his command center, watching as Jericho's operation crumbled before his eyes. Every escape route was blocked. Every contingency plan had failed. It felt like every shadow hid another federal agent, biding their time, ready to end his reign. "Make the call," Dominic ordered. As Jericho's phone rang for the final time, Dominic spoke without hesitation. "Come to mock me," Jericho growled, his voice seething. "No," Dominic corrected him, his tone cold. "I'm here to teach you." "You thought you were in control," Dominic continued, his words deliberate, "believing you held all the power. But you were never anything more than a pawn in my game. This entire downfall, you set it in motion from the very start. The moment you dared to touch what was mine, your fate was sealed," Dominic added. "The evidence? It was planted in your warehouses months ago. The surveillance? It's been running long before you even crossed paths with Melissa. Every move you made was anticipated, recorded, and turned against you." Jericho's voice faltered. "Why? Why go through all of this?" he demanded. "Because people need to understand," Dominic replied calmly. "Actions carry consequences. Betrayal comes with a price, and some men aren't meant to be played." "I'll get out of this," Jericho spat defiantly. "When I do, you'll have nothing left." Dominic smirked, unshaken. "While you've been scrambling, my team has been working. Every one of your accounts exposed, every criminal connection laid bare, every person you've ever known dug up. You won't be spending years in prison, Jericho. You're finished. For good." The distant wail of sirens echoed through the air, growing louder as tactical units closed in. The sound of boots on gravel, the rush of finality. "One last thing," Dominic said, his voice a cutting whisper. "Thank you." "Thank me? For what?" Jericho's confusion was palpable. "For showing Melissa who she really chose over her family," Dominic said coldly. "For teaching her the true face of monsters. Consider it your final lesson to her." The phone line went dead. In the background, the sounds of federal agents crashing through doors reached Dominic's ears. On the monitors, he saw Jericho, arms raised in surrender, his empire in ruins, reputation shattered. "Sir," Marshall entered with a tablet in hand. "Mrs. Ramirez is requesting to speak with you. Says it's urgent." Dominic turned away from the screens, his expression hardening. No, she made her choice. Now she'll live with it. "What happens to her now?" Larry asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "She'll try to rebuild," Dominic answered with a sigh, straightening his tie. "Find new allies, forge new plans. But every door she tries to open will slam shut. Every opportunity will evaporate. Every person she thought she could trust will turn their back on her. She's finished." Larry raised an eyebrow. "You're going to ruin her completely?" Dominic paused, his gaze distant. "She did that to herself. I'm just making sure she feels the full weight of the consequences for her betrayal." On the screen, Melissa was shown being led to a police car, wrapped in a shock blanket. Her once immaculate clothing was torn and stained, her makeup streaked with tears, her confident posture shattered. She was broken, a ghost of her former self. Good, Dominic thought quietly to himself. Fear is the greatest teacher. He turned to Larry. Activate the final protocol. I want every social connection closed to her. Block her from every credit application. Shut down any attempt to restart her life. It's already underway, Larry confirmed, his fingers dancing over the tablet screen. By morning, her reputation will be toxic in every circle she once ruled. Perfect, Dominic said, grabbing his coat. Now, we move to phase 3. We wait for her to realize that some games can't be won, some choices can't be undone, and some men cannot be betrayed without consequences. He stepped toward the window, watching the police lights fade in the distance. Act 2 was over. The hunters had become the hunted. The predators had turned into prey. And the world would soon learn why you never cross a man who makes it his business to ruin lives. Later that night, as the darkness closed in over Austin, Jericho paced the basement of Widow Ling's hideout, his remaining crew preparing for one last strike. His empire was collapsing, but he still had enough muscle left to make a final push. "The target's place is quiet," one of his scouts reported, studying images of Dominic's home. "Minimal security. Either he's losing his edge, or he's trying to make us think that." Jericho grabbed a crowbar off the table, testing its weight in his hands. "Where's the wife?" "Safe house on Riverside," the scout answered. "Police protection, but she's starting to crack. Keeps trying to make calls." Jericho's smile was cold and calculating. "What about Ramirez?" "Nothing," came the reply. "He's completely frozen her out. No money, no support. She's on her own." "Desperate," Jericho muttered, a wicked smile forming. "Perfect. Desperate people make mistakes, and I need her to make a big one." His phone buzzed. It was a text from Melissa. "Need to talk. It's important." Jericho's grin widened, a glint of triumph in his eyes. "Right on schedule." He quickly typed his response. "Meet me in 1 hour, same place as always." When Melissa walked into the cafe, it was almost empty. She was dressed in cheap, generic clothes now, her once coveted designer wardrobe a far-off memory, along with everything else she'd lost. Her eyes were hollow from lack of sleep, dark shadows beneath them betraying the countless restless nights. Jericho noticed the change the moment she sat down. "You look awful," he said, blunt as ever. "It's all gone," she said, her voice trembling. "My bank accounts, my credit cards, even my phone plan. He's taken everything from me." "That's why we're making a move tonight," Jericho said, leaning in closer. Melissa shook her head, the strain on her face evident. "You don't understand. This is how he works. He doesn't just hurt you, he obliterates everything. He watches as your life falls apart, piece by piece." "Not this time," Jericho said firmly, his voice hard. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I've got people watching his place. Tonight, we're going to make him feel real pain." Melissa's gaze dropped. "He'll be expecting that, Jericho. He's no fool." "That's why you go in first," he countered. Her face drained of color. "What?" "You'll keep him busy," Jericho explained. "Talk to him. Keep him distracted while my team gets in position. He won't let me through the security system. He'll focus on stopping me." A cold grin spread across his face, sharp and calculating. "You'll sneak in through the back, just like you used to. You know how to move around unnoticed." Melissa hesitated. "And what if I refuse?" Jericho's grin only deepened. "Then I'll start making some calls. Everyone will know about your deals, the company secrets you sold out, the money you helped launder." Fear flickered in her eyes. "How long do you think you'll last once everyone knows you're a rat?" At Aegis Security's headquarters across town, Dominic was tracking the entire conversation on hidden cameras. Every word, every threat was being logged, every movement meticulously recorded. "She'll do it," Larry said, watching the live feed. "She doesn't have a choice." Dominic nodded, pulling up blueprints of the building. "How many men does Jericho still have?" "Maybe a dozen. The rest were taken out in the raids or scattered when things went south," Larry replied. "3 are watching your place, 2 are tailing Melissa, and the rest are likely staging nearby." Larry zoomed in on the surveillance photos. "They're armed. This won't be easy." "That's fine," Dominic said, adjusting his tie. "It's time to set the trap." "You're just going to sit back and wait for them to walk into it?" Larry asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. "It's the cleanest way to end this," Dominic replied coldly. "One swift strike." At that moment, Marshall entered with fresh intel. "Sir, Melissa just bought lockpicks from a hardware store. Nothing fancy, but she's preparing." "Predictable," Dominic muttered, glancing at his watch. "Activate Protocol Omega. I want all sensors live, every camera online. Get the teams into position. ATF on standby, FBI ready, and even the Texas Rangers want in on this." Back at the cafe, Melissa clutched her coffee cup with trembling hands. "What's the plan?" she asked, voice tight. "It's simple," Jericho replied, tapping his crowbar against his palm. "You go in through the back. Keep him talking. While he's distracted with you, my men will get in place." His smile grew dark. "And then, I'll show your husband what happens when he crosses me." Melissa met his gaze, her voice barely audible. "He'll kill you." Jericho snorted. "No one's invincible, not when they're bleeding out on the floor." Melissa stood, gathering what little courage she had left. "I'll be there, midnight. Don't be late." Jericho watched her leave, then pulled out his phone. "Follow her. Make sure she doesn't try anything stupid." In his office, Dominic went over the final details. Every exit covered, every possible angle accounted for. Nothing was left to chance. "Sir," Marshall appeared at the door. "All systems are ready. We're just waiting for your orders." "Good," Dominic said, his face as cold as ever. "It's time to end this." Larry studied him for a moment, knowing that this had always been where things were headed. From the start, when Melissa had sided with Jericho, it had always been leading to this point. Dominic adjusted his coat, eyes steely and determined. Some people need to understand that every choice has consequences. Every betrayal carries a price. His smile was as cold as ice. And tonight, the price will be everything. As the night stretched on, everything was set in motion. Jericho was gathering his remaining men, Melissa preparing for her final, desperate move to outsmart him, and Dominic, he was watching it all, waiting to spring the trap that had been months in the making. The endgame was here, and only one player understood the rules. The moon cast a pale glow over Dominic's front lawn as midnight drew near. From his position in the command center, Dominic watched intently on the security feeds as Melissa parked her car 2 blocks down the street. Her hands gripped the wheel with a fierce tension, her knuckles paling as she tried to steady herself. "Target 2 is on the move." Larry's voice broke through the calm, his words sharp and efficient. "Jericho's got 3 vehicles closing in from different angles. They're being cautious, but they're coming." Without hesitation, Larry outlined the plan. "First team, take Henderson and Pine. Second team, cover the east side. Third team, remain mobile." He paused, his voice turning grave. "These aren't amateurs, Dominic. They're geared up with military-grade equipment, armed with real firepower." "Understood," Dominic responded, adjusting his tie without taking his eyes off the monitor. He observed Melissa preparing her lockpicks, her hands shaking with visible anxiety. Melissa's unease was palpable as she approached the house, every step calculated but hesitant, glancing around nervously as though every sound might signal her undoing. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with the lock at the back door. "Sir," Marshall's voice crackled through the comm. Jericho's lead vehicle has stopped. They're getting out. Crowbars, baseball bats, and pistols. Looks like they're prepared for more than just intimidation. Dominic's expression hardened, his smile sharp and cold. Larry, show them the difference between a threat and real violence. A rifle shot shattered the quiet night, the first bullet finding its mark with deadly precision. The driver of Jericho's lead vehicle slumped forward, dead before he even had a chance to react. A second shot followed almost immediately, a double tap that was as clean and controlled as any sniper's drill. Jericho's frantic voice crackled over the comm. "What the hell? Who's shooting? Where the hell are they?" "Can't see them, boss," one of his men replied, panic creeping into his voice. "They've got the high ground. Can't locate them." "Don't let a damn sniper get in your heads," Jericho growled. "Find them." Melissa froze at the sound of gunfire, her lockpick slipping from her grasp, falling onto the porch with a quiet, anxious clink. Through the cameras, Dominic could see the mix of fear and desperation on her face. "Having some trouble?" Jericho's voice echoed from the shadows, making Melissa flinch. He emerged from his hiding spot, crowbar in hand, its cold metal gleaming faintly under the porch light. "This is a mistake." "Not my mistake," Melissa murmured, backing away with wide, panicked eyes. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I know exactly what he's capable of," Jericho sneered, his smile cruel. "That's why we're here." Taking a step forward, his voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "Time to show your husband what happens when you push the wrong people too far." "He'll be ready," Melissa fired back, her voice shaky but defiant. "He's always ready. You can count on it." Jericho grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully. "That's why you're going first." "Ring the bell," he ordered, his voice low and threatening. "When he answers, keep him talking. And if you don't?" He pressed the crowbar into her side. "You'll find out if hospitals take patients without insurance." Inside the command center, Dominic maintained his calm demeanor as he watched the scene unfold on the screen. "Marshal," he asked, his voice steady. "Status on the federal response teams?" "ATF's in position," came the immediate reply. "FBI's blocking escape routes. Texas Rangers are working with local PD. Everything's in place." Dominic straightened his jacket, a subtle smile curling at the corners of his lips. "Perfect." As Melissa approached the front door, the porch light flicked on. Jericho pressed himself against the wall, crowbar in hand, thinking he was unnoticed by the cameras. He was wrong. Dominic tracked his every movement, cataloging his every step. "Do it," Jericho hissed at Melissa. "Make it convincing." Melissa's hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell, her breath quickening. 1 second passed, then 2. The door creaked open, revealing Dominic in a sharp, tailored suit, exuding calm authority. "Melissa," he said, his tone flat, almost uninterested. "This is a surprise." I needed to talk," she stammered, her eyes darting anxiously to where Jericho hid in the shadows. "At midnight?" Dominic raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. Melissa's face drained of color. She realized with sinking certainty that the ambush had already failed. Jericho saw it too, his grip tightening around the crowbar. In one fluid motion, he swung the weapon at Dominic's head with lethal intent. The strike never reached its target. A rifle shot cracked through the air, and one of Jericho's men dropped to the ground, a clean hole through his chest. More shots rang out, rapid and precise. Each one found its mark with surgical accuracy. "Welcome to my home," Dominic said calmly, unfazed by the unfolding chaos. Jericho froze, the crowbar mid-swing, as he took in the scene. "I've been expecting you." "You think a few shots scare me?" Jericho snarled, raising the crowbar once more. "No," Dominic replied, stepping aside to reveal Larry in the doorway behind him, pistol aimed directly at Jericho's head. "But I think dying might concern you." At that moment, red laser dots appeared on Melissa's chest. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Nobody leaves, Dominic said coldly, his voice like ice. We're going to have a conversation about choices and consequences. Jericho's face twisted in fury, but a flicker of fear crept into his voice. You're bluffing. You won't kill us here. It's too messy. Kill you? Dominic's smile was empty, devoid of warmth. That would be too easy. No, I've got something much more satisfying planned. The sound of headlights flooded the yard as federal vehicles rolled in, surrounding the house on all sides. The trap was closing. Dominic's voice, soft and lethal, rang out one last time. Welcome to my home, he repeated, his gaze never leaving Jericho, watching as the last remnants of his confidence drained away. The agents moved in with military precision, quickly securing every point of the perimeter as if each step was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. This is the end of your empire, Jericho, Dominic said, his voice devoid of any emotion, sharp and final. Your men are either dead or detained, and your assets are already being seized. You think this is the end, Dominic? Jericho scoffed, his voice tinged with defiance. I've been through worse. I'll rebuild. I always do. No. Dominic's response was simple, and with a barely perceptible motion of his head, he signaled Larry to act. Larry pressed a button on his phone, and the massive screens around the house came to life. The footage was crystal clear, showing the brutal truth of Jericho's actions. Every illegal fight, every murder, every body disposed of in meticulous detail. Jericho's face drained of color, his confidence evaporating as he watched the footage. How is this even possible? His voice was barely a whisper. Those cameras were swept, Jericho muttered to himself, trying to cling to some form of control. Amateurs, amateur equipment, amateur sweeps. Dominic took a step toward him, his tone unbothered and almost condescending. You never understood the game, did you, Jericho? You never understood who you were up against. Jericho stammered, his mind trying to find some escape. The police. Dominic interrupted him with a soft laugh, as if Jericho's words were absurd. The police? Look around you, Jericho. These aren't police. These are federal agents, men and women who've spent months building this case. Every lead you followed, I planted. Every piece of evidence they've gathered, I handed them. They've been waiting for this moment. From her position against the wall, Melissa spoke with a quiet but resigned realization. You had it all figured out from the start. The moment you picked him, this was always going to happen. Dominic's eyes shifted to her, cold as ice. Every move you made, every decision you thought was a step forward, it was all predicted. Every countermeasure you took only brought you closer to this end. An agent approached, voice firm and professional. We're ready for the arrests, sir. Dominic nodded. Start with him, he said, pointing to Jericho. I believe several states have warrants for his arrest, not to mention the bodies we found in his basement. As agents closed in, Jericho swung a crowbar with a final, futile attempt at defiance. But before he could land a blow, a single shot rang out. Larry's shot, taking Jericho in the knee. He collapsed in a heap, shrieking in pain. Dominic stood still, watching Jericho writhe on the ground. And those other bodies, Jericho, the ones you thought were hidden behind the freezer? How did I know about them? Jericho's eyes were wide with terror. How do you know everything? Every crime, every secret, Dominic said coldly, his gaze unwavering as the agents cuffed Jericho. I know it all. With the finality of a death sentence, Dominic turned to watch Jericho being dragged away. Enjoy federal prison, Jericho. I hear they have a special interest in people like you, criminals who target women and children. He gave a slight smile. Welcome to reality. Melissa, pale and shaking, stumbled toward Dominic. What about me? Dominic glanced at his watch, a small, knowing smirk on his face. In about 30 seconds, you'll be arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted corporate espionage. The evidence against you is solid. What evidence? Her voice wavered, but there was still a hint of disbelief. Every conversation, every deal, every attempt to sell secrets. It's all on record, Dominic said with a sharp edge to his voice. Funny how people talk when they think they're in control. Tears began to streak down Melissa's face as federal agents closed in on her, ready to take her into custody. The kids are no longer your concern. We've already submitted evidence of your criminal ties to the court. Your parental rights? Gone. You can't do this. Melissa's voice was barely a whisper as the cuffs were snapped around her wrists. You can't just take everything from me. I already have, Dominic said coldly, his expression unyielding. Everything you were, everything you had, gone. Straightening his tie, Dominic's voice grew even colder. Consider it the price of betrayal. As Melissa was led away, Larry stepped up to Dominic, his admiration barely concealed. Smooth operation, just like the good old days. Cleaner, Dominic replied, scanning the scene with a cold, calculating gaze. In the past, we had rules, he said, watching as agents swarmed the house, collecting evidence and arresting suspects. Now, we make the rules. He observed the flashing lights of emergency vehicles filling the street, painting the night in red and blue. And everyone will learn why some men are never meant to be crossed. The ambush had failed, and 2 more players had learned why challenging Dominic Ramirez was a fatal mistake. Inside Aegis Security's conference room, the air was thick with tension. Multiple screens displayed Jericho's empire crumbling in real time. Across Texas, police raids, asset seizures, and arrests tore his criminal network apart piece by piece. Where do we stand, Marshal? Dominic asked, his eyes glued to the screens. 38 high-ranking arrests, 15 properties seized, bank accounts frozen across 6 countries, Marshal reported, holding his tablet. Show me the footage from the Widow's Hollow, Dominic ordered. The main screen switched to live footage of FBI agents tearing through the Widow's house, floorboards pulled up, walls cut open. Each new discovery was a confirmation of the meticulous planning that had gone into this operation. They found a room behind the freezer, Larry said, scanning incoming reports. So far, 1 body. Matches missing persons reports from the last year. Send everything to the DA's office, Dominic instructed. I want airtight charges. They're talking multiple life sentences. No parole, Larry confirmed. The door opened, and Agent Sanchez from the FBI's Organized Crime Division stepped in. Despite himself, he couldn't help but be impressed. Mr. Ramirez, he said with a respectful nod. Hell of an operation you've put together. Care to walk me through how you pulled it off? Dominic gestured to the chair across from him. Take a seat, Agent. Dominic gestured toward an unoccupied chair. Marshal, bring up the timeline. As the screens powered up, a barrage of images, surveillance footage, financial statements, and tapped conversations unfolded. 6 months of painstaking preparation were now on display. It all started when Melissa contacted Jericho, Dominic began, setting the stage. Not the first time, he continued after a brief pause, giving the room a moment to absorb. This happened 3 months ago, when she was still testing the waters. You could sense it coming. His eyes flicked toward Sanchez. I knew long before she did. With a few swift commands, Dominic brought up security footage from the widow's farm. Watch this, he said, pointing at the screen. She thought she was being discreet. Drinks, networking, playing the role. What she didn't realize was that every bartender and waitress was on my payroll. Sanchez studied the footage, absorbing the details. So, you had moles inside his operation? Dominic's face remained impassive. It was more than that, he replied, gesturing toward the screen. I had full access to every corner of his security network. Cameras, microphones, computers. Nothing he did was beyond my reach. Impressive, Sanchez remarked. It had to be, Dominic responded firmly. Jericho wasn't just any street thug. He had layers of protection, political connections, corrupt law enforcement, judges in his back pocket. To bring him down, We needed solid, irrefutable proof. Sanchez nodded slowly, grasping the weight of the situation. "And your wife?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "She was part of the plan," Dominic replied coldly. "She chose him. She willingly became a pawn in this game." Sanchez raised an eyebrow. "So, you let her think she was in control? Every move she made only gave us more ammunition." Dominic's voice dripped with contempt. "Speaking of which," Sanchez interjected, pulling something from his briefcase, "we found something in Jericho's office." He placed a stack of files onto the table. "Plans for infiltrating your company's secured files. Your wife's signature was on everything. Corporate espionage. You can add that to her charges." "Already done," Dominic replied, unruffled. "But I'm curious. Why let it drag on this long? You could have stopped it months ago." Dominic stood, walking toward the window. His eyes scanned the sprawling city below. Taking Jericho down was just the beginning. I needed to expose everything. The corrupt cops, the shady politicians, the judges on the take. I had to let them think they were winning, let them get complacent. That's when they start slipping up. And those mistakes, they cost them everything. "Exactly," Larry chimed in from the doorway. "People make mistakes when they think they're untouchable." Dominic turned his gaze back to Sanchez. "Check your inbox. You'll find files on 3 state judges, 2 police captains, and a federal prosecutor, all involved in Jericho's operation." Sanchez's phone buzzed, and he quickly examined the incoming files. "This is thorough," Sanchez said, impressed by the scope. "It had to be," Dominic replied with a thin smile. "People need to understand there are consequences for their actions." "And betrayal?" Marshall added, cutting in. "Jericho's lawyer just tried to access the offshore accounts, the ones they thought were clean and untouched. Turns out, they moved all $47 million into FBI holding accounts, just 10 minutes before the raid." Sanchez let out a low whistle. "How did you even find those accounts?" "Because I set them up," Dominic said, pulling up banking records, shell companies, and fabricated identities. Every time they thought they were hiding money, they were just putting it exactly where I wanted it. At that moment, a junior analyst appeared at the door. "Sir, Mrs. Ramirez wants to speak with you. Says it's urgent." "Put her through," Dominic responded, his voice neutral. The screen shifted to the police station's interview room, where Melissa sat, her designer elegance replaced with the starkness of prison garb. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice shaking. Dominic's voice came through, cold and detached. "Was any of it real? Or was I just another pawn in your game?" Her eyes hardened, a mixture of rage and confusion. "You made yourself a piece the moment you chose him," Dominic shot back. From then on, everything was set in motion. He glanced at the screen. The declined cards, the locked accounts, the closed doors, every step you took to rebuild just reinforced your guilt. And now, he paused, his gaze sharpening. "Your children will never see you again." "The evidence is undeniable. Funny how people start confessing when they think they're winning." She broke then, tears streaking her makeup. "You destroyed everything," she whispered, her voice cracking. Dominic's voice grew harder. "No. You destroyed everything. I just made sure you understood the cost." With one last unwavering look, Dominic cut the connection, leaving Melissa to face the full weight of her decisions. "That was brutal," Sanchez remarked, shaking his head. "Necessary," Dominic replied as he returned to his seat. "Some lessons are only learned through absolutes." Marshall spoke up then. "Jericho wants a deal. He says he has information on other organizations." "Let him talk," Dominic said with a hint of amusement. "Every word just strengthens our case." The screen flickered to life, showing Jericho in his holding cell. The man who once oozed arrogance now appeared small, desperate, aware of how far he had fallen. Sanchez glanced at Dominic. "One last question. That night at your house, you could have ended all of this right then. Why let them think they had a chance?" Dominic turned back to the screen, his face expressionless. Because people don't learn from quick victories. Dominic monitored the steady collapse of his foes, their downfall unfolding across multiple screens. With each passing moment, they were learning, painfully and inexorably, the magnitude of their undoing. The collapse of everything they had built, reduced to rubble, and the reasons behind it. Larry approached, holding a tablet in his hand. The data had arrived. Jericho's entire network had been exposed for what it truly was. Every asset had been seized, every ally either arrested or in flight. A total victory, but the mission was far from over. Dominic remained on his feet, silent. "Show me Melissa's files," he ordered. "I want to see every attempt she's made to rebuild." Marshall wasted no time, pulling up the relevant data. Each credit application had been rejected. Every job interview had been canceled. Her entire support network had completely severed ties. Dominic found a grim satisfaction in that. It was the real defeat. Still, no one in the room showed any hint of pleasure. This wasn't about winning. It was about sending a message. Now the world would know that some people should never be crossed, no matter the cost. The screens continued to show the aftermath. Lives ruined, an empire crumbling, consequences meted out with chilling precision. All because two people had gambled with the wrong individual. In the meantime, Melissa sat in the Austin bus station, examining her dwindling funds, $43 and some change. It was all she had left from the life she once knew. Through hidden cameras, Dominic observed her as she scanned departure times, searching desperately for a way out of the trap tightening around her. She was trying to buy a ticket to Houston. Card declined, as expected, Marshall reported from the surveillance hub. She'll try paying in cash next. Dominic observed her approach the counter, anticipating the inevitable. The ticket agent's voice crackled through the comms. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're on a no-travel list. I can't issue you a ticket without proper clearance." "This must be a mistake." Melissa's voice wavered, anxiety creeping in. "Check again," she begged. "Please." "There's no mistake," the agent responded flatly. "Federal authorities have a hold on your travel due to pending charges." Dominic remained motionless in his office, his focus unwavering. No one in the room expressed any satisfaction. "Where else has she tried?" he asked. 3 banks rejected her attempts to open new accounts, Larry replied, glancing at his tablet. 2 hotels turned her away. Even a library card got flagged. Her former circle must have been informed about her ties to Jericho's crimes by now, Dominic observed. Funny how quickly people abandon you when the scandal hits. The surveillance feed showed Melissa leaving the bus station, her posture deflated, her spirit broken. She walked toward a small cafe, one of the few places left willing to accept cash. Marshall spoke again. "She's trying to reach her old lawyer." "Put it on speaker," Dominic instructed. The attorney's voice filled the room. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ramirez, but I can no longer represent you. The evidence against you is overwhelming." "I can explain everything," Melissa pleaded, her voice trembling. "Please just give me a chance." "There's nothing left to explain," the lawyer responded coldly. "The recordings are clear. You were involved in money laundering, attempted to sell corporate secrets, and assisted in criminal activities. You should take the plea deal. If this goes to trial, you'll face a lengthy sentence." The line went silent. Melissa stared at her phone in disbelief, feeling another lifeline slip away. "She's adapting quickly," Larry noted, updating the intel. "She just tried to open an account under her maiden name, but the system flagged it immediately." "All her identities are compromised now," Dominic muttered, adjusting his tie as he prepared to execute the final step. "Is everything in place at the country club?" "Just as you instructed," Larry confirmed. The Austin Country Club's dining room grew tense when Melissa walked in. Dressed in her last clean outfit, she did her best to maintain composure as she approached her old friends, seated at their usual table. "Patricia," Melissa forced a smile. I've been trying to reach you. Have you? Patricia's voice was frostier than ice. How interesting. We've been trying to figure out how our friend got mixed up in a murder. It's not what you think, one of the other women interrupted. The FBI showed us proof. You helped him launder money through our charity fundraiser. I didn't know, Melissa stammered. Save it. Patricia cut her off, standing up from the table. The board voted this morning. Your membership is revoked. And if you try to contact any of us again, we'll go to the authorities. Melissa stood frozen, watching as her last remaining social connections walked away, leaving her alone in a sea of former friends. Back in his office, Dominic sifted through the final details. What's her financial situation? Complete lockdown, Marshall reported. Every account is frozen, every asset seized. Her credit score is in the gutter, job prospects are non-existent. She was turned down for a retail position after the background check flagged federal charges. Even temp agencies are refusing to hire her. No hotel will take her, no housing options left. Dominic nodded, a brief flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. The walls had closed in around Melissa Ramirez, and there was no way out. She had played with fire, and now the consequences were irreversible. Apartments require comprehensive background checks. Melissa had been living out of her car for an extended period, but that temporary refuge was soon to be reclaimed. Dominic gave a slow, purposeful nod. This was her last shot. She had just been given a final opportunity. Larry handed her a letter. She had reached out to her mother regarding the children, but the reply was cold. A swift rejection, accompanied by copies of the court orders that had stripped her of her parental rights. The surveillance footage captured Melissa sitting in her car, reading the letter, tears streaming down her face as another door was firmly shut. A junior analyst approached. She's making one last move, he said. She's contacted a reporter, claiming whistleblower status on Aegis Security. Put it through, Dominic ordered. The reporter's voice crackled over the phone. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ramirez, but we can't publish your story. The evidence we have indicates you were deeply involved in criminal activity. Melissa's voice trembled. But I have proof. No, the reporter interrupted. What you have is desperation. There's a difference. You should speak with your court-appointed lawyer. Good luck. The line went dead. Another possibility, erased. Another attempt, shattered. Dominic stood quietly, observing the scene. She understands now, he murmured. Every option's gone, Larry said, watching Melissa in real time. Every door is shut, every hope extinguished. She's breaking, Dominic corrected. No, she's already broken. Now she's just realizing that what's shattered can't be fixed. The cameras tracked her final drive through Austin, capturing the once cherished places that had meant everything to her. The country club that had once welcomed her, the boutiques that had vied for her business, the school her children would never attend again, all of them, now mere monuments to her loss. Complete the sequence, Dominic ordered coldly. I want every escape route closed, every door sealed, every chance snuffed out, he added with finality. Larry nodded. It's done. She's got nothing left, nowhere to turn, no one left to turn to. Dominic's lips curled into a faint, satisfied smile as Melissa's car faded into the darkness. This is the moment when she learns. Some betrayals cannot be undone, some choices are irreversible, and some men you cannot cross without losing everything. The hunt is over. The prey had been cornered, and Austin, like everyone else, had learned why defying Dominic Ramirez meant utter, devastating ruin. The first rays of morning bathed Austin's skyline in a golden glow as Dominic sifted through the final reports. Jericho's sentencing had been swift and merciless, multiple life sentences with no hope of parole. The evidence against him had been irrefutable, enough to overwhelm even the most skilled defense attorneys. Updates from the federal task force, Larry said, entering with new intelligence. They've linked Jericho to 12 additional murders using our surveillance footage. Prosecutors are calling it the largest organized crime bust in Texas history. Jericho's last statement, Larry continued, was a rambling breakdown in court. He kept insisting it was all part of your plan from the very beginning. The judge thought he was losing his mind. Dominic's lips curled into a cold smile. Good. Let him talk. It'll make things easier for us. And as for the other loose end, Larry said, glancing at the next report, Melissa's preliminary hearing is this afternoon. Her lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. Let me see the terms, Dominic replied without lifting his gaze. Larry handed him the document. The legal jargon was clear: years of prison time, complete asset forfeiture, and a full confession of guilt. She won't take it, Dominic predicted. Not yet. She still believes there's something left to salvage. She'll hold out until she's trapped with no way out. Want to watch her fight? Larry asked. The courthouse security feed showed Melissa entering the building. She wore clothes that weren't hers, an evident sign of her fall from grace. Her once flawless designer wardrobe was now gone. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent coming to terms with her ruin. Mrs. Ramirez, the judge's voice echoed through the surveillance. You are accused of multiple federal offenses. How do you plead? Melissa's voice cracked. Your Honor, I can explain everything. That's not the question, the judge interrupted. How do you plead? I need time. The evidence is overwhelming, the prosecutor interjected. We have recordings of you conspiring with known criminals, documents outlining your involvement in corporate espionage, and proof of money laundering through charitable organizations. But I was forced, Melissa's voice faltered. We have footage of you meeting with Mr. Rowe willingly, the prosecutor continued. Multiple times, long before any threats were made. You weren't a victim, Mrs. Ramirez. You were a willing participant. Inside his office, Dominic watched Melissa's composure begin to crack. His voice was sharp as he gave the order. Time to end this. Make the call. Larry dialed the courthouse. Moments later, a bailiff approached Melissa's attorney with a message. The lawyer's face drained of color as he read it. Your Honor, the attorney said, standing. May we request a brief recess? New evidence has just come to light. The judge, intrigued, agreed. In the conference room, Melissa's attorney flipped through the photos, documents, and transcripts, more damning evidence of her active role in Jericho's crimes. And just like that, the walls closed in. Her lawyer had laid everything bare. They've got it all, he said. Every conversation, every commitment you made, every failed attempt to access secure data. If this goes to trial, you're facing at least 20 years behind bars. He paused, watching her as though trying to shake some sense into her. There must be something you can offer, some way to turn this around. She shook her head slowly. There's nothing left. Take the plea, the attorney urged. 10 years, with a shot at parole. It's a far lighter sentence than you're entitled to. Melissa stood in the courtroom, her legs unsteady, her voice barely audible. I plead guilty, Your Honor, she murmured. Once the stream cut off, Larry turned to Dominic. Everything's tied up. Should I proceed with the rest? Dominic nodded once, signaling for him to continue. Go ahead. Across town, Melissa's life crumbled. Her high-end car was confiscated. The designer clothes and jewelry she'd once flaunted were now seized as evidence. Her credit cards were canceled, her gym membership revoked, and her social media profiles permanently erased. Sir, Marshall said, stepping into the room with a tablet in hand. She's asking for a final meeting, wants closure, apparently. Where? Dominic asked, glancing at the screen. Muller Park. She says she'll be alone, Marshall replied. Dominic glanced at his watch. It's time. When he reached the park, it was eerily quiet. Melissa sat alone on a bench, barely recognizable. Her clothes were ordinary now, stripped of the luxury she had once paraded. The poised socialite persona was gone, replaced by someone who understood, perhaps too late, the price of her betrayal. I didn't think you'd show up. she said quietly as he approached. 5 minutes. Tell me why. Why do this? Why not just leave me and walk away? She asked, her voice tight with emotion. Because people needed to understand, Dominic said, standing tall, unyielding. Actions have consequences. Betrayal doesn't come free. You ruined everything, my life, my future, she retorted, her voice faltering as tears threatened to fall. No, Dominic answered coldly. You ruined it all. I simply made sure you knew what it cost. Her face went pale. The kids, they aren't mine anymore, are they? You had the adoption papers signed. That's right, Dominic replied without a moment's hesitation. By summer they'll have a new mother. Tears streaked her face as she absorbed the full weight of his words. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Every step, every move. It was all part of the plan. From the moment you chose him over me, your fate was sealed. Dominic replied, his voice cold and sharp. Every move you made, every decision you thought would save you, only buried you deeper. Desperation flooded her eyes as she clung to the last thread of hope. What do I do now? Where do I go from here? You disappear, he said. Find some small town where no one knows you. Take whatever job you can. Live with the knowledge that you did this to yourself. She tried to summon a last ounce of defiance. I'll rebuild. I'll find a way back. No, you won't, Dominic said, turning to leave. Every time you think you found a way forward, I'll be there, watching, waiting, reminding you why everything you had is gone. I'm sorry, she called after him, her voice breaking. Does that even mean anything? Dominic paused, but didn't turn around. Sorry means regret. You don't regret what you did to me. You regret losing. He walked away, leaving her to face the aftermath of her choices alone. As he stepped outside, his phone buzzed with updates. Jericho's life sentence had begun. Melissa's guilty plea had been officially accepted. The empires they'd built, now reduced to rubble. Back at the office, Larry was waiting with a bottle of aged whiskey and 2 glasses. To checkmate, he said, raising his glass. Dominic met his gaze, a small, satisfied smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. To never playing the same game twice. The 2 clinked glasses, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the Austin skyline in golden hues. It hadn't been about love, or hate, or even vengeance. It had been about consequences, about showing the world the price of crossing the wrong person. Dominic had never forgiven her. He had never forgotten. He had simply won. Our story has come to an end. Every action has consequences. Betrayal, manipulation, and the hunger for power always turn against those who wield them. This story isn't just about revenge. It's a lesson that even the most carefully planned lies will eventually collapse under the weight of truth. Dominic didn't shout, didn't beg, and didn't seek reckless vengeance. He did something far worse. He let his enemies build their own downfall. In life, people often think they can play others, but the real players are the ones who wait, observe, and strike at the perfect moment. This story teaches us, never deceive those who can see through you. Don't build your life on lies, because when the truth comes out, you'll have nothing left. No trust, no power, and no way back. What do you think about this story? Share your opinion in the comments. Has this ever happened to you? May the Force be with you. See you soon, friends.